Chapter 153. The Inquisition 2. Although the color had faded, the magic circle itself could still be seen on the ground. The Tower Masters, Lovelian and Melkith, approached the magic circle with their eyes shining. This is ancient script, isn't it? Melkith turned to Lovelian for confirmation. But at first glance these look like gels, Lovelian pointed out. The wavering does resemble it. As long as there are systematic similarities, we might be able to translate them. Well, there are more than a few ancient characters. This might be the ancient script of the demon folk, Lovelian remarked. As expected, this is knowledge passed on by the remnants of the demon kings, right? But isn't this something that we should call Balzac for? Melkith hesitantly asked. There's no way we can call such a suspicious expert over, Lovelian refused. If it's the ancient script, I'm also quite well versed in it, so for now, let's continue looking for a bit longer. Lovelian and Melkith were caught up in their own personal conversation as they examined the magic circle. After staring at the two of them for a few moments, Eugene lifted up a kasha, which he had been holding in his left hand. These are the remaining parts of the magic circle that I can remember, Eugene informed them. The rest of the magic circle, which now remained solely in his head, was drawn in the air. Because mana wasn't infused into it, the magic circle wasn't activated. However, his actions goaded Himoria into movement before he could say anything. Himoria was now standing between Eugene and the magic circle that he had drawn in midair, glaring at Eugene with narrowed eyes. Eugene could feel a simmering hostility directed at him deep within those ruby-red eyes. What is it? Eugene asked cautiously. Himoria was quite a strange woman. That black metal mask that completely covered her mouth from corner to corner reminded Eugene of the muzzle placed around the jaws of vicious dogs. Wasn't it uncomfortable to wear something like that over her own mouth? You would have to spend quite some time taking it off every time you wanted to eat and drink. If you have something to say, then just say it to my face, Eugene demanded. However, Himoria remained completely silent. Instead, a "geed" sound could be heard coming from inside her metal mask. Was she grinding her teeth? Or was there really some kind of gag on the inside of the mask that she was biting on? Now that Eugene thought about it, from the moment Himoria had passed through the warp gate, she had never once spoken a single word. Excuse me, Atarix called out as he grabbed Himoria by the shoulder and pulled her away. Eugene noticed Atarix's fingers were digging deep into Himoria's shoulder. However, there wasn't any change in Himoria's expression. She simply continued to glare at Eugene like she had done before. In some ways, my disciple is even more fervent than I am, Atarix admitted with a smile as he patted Himoria on the shoulder. But as the hero chosen by the Holy Sword, Eugene interrupted him, I would prefer it if you didn't call me by that title. Alright, I also felt that it might be a bit inconvenient to address you like that during a private conversation, Atarix agreed as he turned his head to look at the magic circle. I know that it can't be helped, but sharing the knowledge of this terrible magic circle with two of Aratha's Tower Masters and the fact that you have it memorized in your head, Sir Eugene, all of that is difficult for us to accept. Did you hear that, Red Tower Master? That good Sir Inquisitor seems to think that you and I might study this shitty magic circle and come up with some bad ideas, Melkith said with a sneer. To be fair, it's not impossible, Atarix argued. As far as I know, if it's for the sake of their interest and goals, wizards would not hesitate to do such crazy things. I can't deny that, but if it's a wizard on the level of us Tower Masters, then they must already be pretty crazy. My own brand of insanity means that I don't have any attention to spare for this sort of unorthodox magic circle. Melkith shot back with a snort and a dismissive wave of her hand. It should be the same for the Red Tower Master, who's just quietly kept his mouth shut beside me. Do you feel that? Ugh. All of my hair is standing on end and I feel like trembling in terror at this killing intent. Want to know why that is? Although the way that Melkith was shivering was highly exaggerated, she wasn't lying. Eugene could also feel a faint killing intent. This killing intent was coming from Lovelian, who was gritting his teeth so tightly it seemed like his molars were about to be crushed into pieces. Melkith continued excitedly, it's because of how furious the Red Tower Master is. Do you know just how great of a hatred for black magic rides within him behind that gentle and handsome mask of his? This is the Red Tower Master Lovelian Sophies. Although he has grown docile in his old age, just up until 30 years ago he was known as the Mad Dog of the Red Tower of Magic and had a truly foul temper. Lovelian finally spoke up. Let's not bring up my shameful past, Spirit Princess of the White Tower of Magic. This was a nickname from Melkith's youth that she had hoped to never hear again. Melkith covered her ears and shrieked like a crow, Kaya. Ignoring this, Lovelian continued. However, it's also true that my fury has indeed been stoked. Inquisitor Atterix, I will absolutely never use or even research this magic circle for my own self-interest. If you wish, I can even swear this on my mana. The Holy Empire is an ally of Aroth, Atterix said with a smile as he shook his head. I'm only expressing my view from my position as an Inquisitor. I have no intention of insisting on something like an oath. Red Tower Master, I'm already aware of why you hate black magic so. Jurke. The sound was heard once more coming from behind Himoria's mask. Trying to draw attention away from this, Atterix turned to Eugene. As for the Lionhearts, the descendants of the Great Vermouth, believing in the purity and righteousness of their bloodline, might be foolish to do so in light of how this incident occurred, but there is no way that Sir Eugene, who has been acknowledged by the Holy Sword, would be corrupted by black magic. Atterix's fingers, still holding onto Himoria's shoulder, tapped on her shoulder in reminder. The grinding sound could no longer be heard from behind Himoria's mask, and the hostility also disappeared from her red eyes. Himoria bowed her head to Eugene and stepped back to stand behind Atterix. Himoria. Don't say anything, don't do anything, and just stand here watching while the Tower Masters inspect the magic circle, Atterix ordered. Himoria nodded in acknowledgement. Is he having her act as surveillance? Eugene thought as he glanced towards Gilead. Upon arriving here, Gilead's complexion had become even paler, and he had chewed on his trembling lips so hard that they were covered in blood. Patriarch, Klein called out as he approached Gilead, looking at him with pity. A diary was discovered in Ewad's rooms within Count Bossar's mansion. Klein pulled out a fancy diary with a leather cover from the inside of his pocket. According to the Black Lions who searched the mansion, this diary was found in the topmost drawer of Ewad's desk as if he intended it to be found, Klein revealed. Isn't that cute? Atterix commented before bursting into laughter. He must have been dreaming up quite a cool future for himself inside of his own head. After finishing the ritual here, having sacrificed all those who had mocked and looked down on him, and having gained such strength from this, he must have imagined himself being able to escape leisurely. However, if he did that, he wouldn't be able to tell you why he did all of this in person, so he deliberately left a diary for you to find. That could be the only explanation for why Ewad had left behind something so important as his diary. Eugene also had the same feeling as Atterix. That idiot must have wanted to reveal the why and how pretty badly, so he must have done something like this. Gilead silently took the diary and opened it. Eugene had thought that Atterix would disagree with them reading the diary, but surprisingly, Atterix allowed Gilead to read it without any interference. It didn't take long for Gilead to read the entire diary. Gilead gave a long sigh and shook his head a few times. Then he lifted his chin and looked up into the sky. Father, Seal called out in a sorrowful voice as she embraced one of Gilead's arms. After letting out a few tears, Gilead handed the diary to Eugene. Is it all right for me to read it? Eugene checked. Since you were the last one to speak to him, I think that you deserve to read it as well, Gilead said. There was no reason to refuse the offer. Eugene was also quite curious about the inner workings of this incident. Really now? Eugene muttered to himself once he was done reading. The first half of the diary didn't have any reading value. It was full of lamentation, rage, and self-hatred. Unable to even put his thoughts down in coherent sentences, it was all just a stuttering stream of words. There were only details about how much he was despised by Count Bossar and how many rebukes he was forced to hear from his mother, Tanis. Although the contents were bound to leave Ewad's father, Gilead, in great regret, they meant nothing to Eugene. He wasn't interested in any of these thoughts. Nevertheless, Eugene continued to flip through the diary. Where the content changed abruptly. Dominic Lionheart came to me. Was at this point. Why had Dominic approached Ewad? Even Dominic himself couldn't really explain the exact reason for it. It was just an impulse. That was all it must have seemed like to Dominic, but Ewad could uncover the precise reason for this. It was none other than the remnants of the Demon King. The whispering of the darkness spirit had led Dominic to approach Ewad. Their existence was nestled deep within Dominic's annihilation hammer, and they held an interest in the blood of the main family flowing through Yuad's body. The spirit said that I was special. After they became a spirit, they had possessed several people, but I was the first to have ever heard their voice. When I asked them about when they first came into existence, they said they became a spirit 100 years ago. As a spirit of darkness, I asked them if they could become as powerful as a demon king? As the remnant thoughts of the defeated demon kings. With just that, they wouldn't be able to become a demon king. But at the same time, they aren't just some trivial existence either. The spirit said that I was special, and they, as a special spirit, matched well with me. I want to become a great wizard, not a spirit summoner. The spirit told me it didn't want to remain as just a spirit either. So if that was the case, what should we do? The spirit said that he would show me the way. All that the ritual requires is the blood of their enemies. So how about Seal and Cyan? If it's those twins, they should make for a great offering. Since so much time has now passed, the power of using Vermouth's bloodline for the ritual must have faded. But the spirit says that with how special I am, I can serve as their vessel, and that offering my brother's blood as a sacrifice will give it significant meaning. Magic really is amazing. The more sacrifices there are, the better. I'll be leaving this house tomorrow. Mother, grandfather, and everyone else are all giving their blessings for my future. Once the ritual is completed, I will become an archwizard that no one can look down on anymore. I haven't decided where I should go once this is all over. The Pride say that I should make a new Lionheart clan to symbolize the main family's downfall, but Dominic doesn't seem to care for that idea. The same goes for me. I hate the Lionhearts. With that, the diary ended. Eugene closed the book and handed it over to Atarax, who had been waiting patiently. I knew that he had gone insane when he fought, but it seems that he was already insane before he even started writing that diary, Eugene observed. From the day before Yuad finally left the mansion, Yuad was the only living human left in the Count's estate. Count Bassar, Tanis, and the servants were all killed by Yuad before he left. It seems that the power of this black magic ritual is amplified by the extent to which it breaks taboos. Flipping through the diary, Atarax continued speaking. The Demon King's enemy was the Great Vermouth, who subjugated them 300 years ago. As the heir to his blood, they wanted that exiled son to sacrifice his own siblings. If they had succeeded, there should be no better condition than that for performing this black magic ritual. It seems that it was true that Yuad's blood was quite special. The blood of their enemy. Instead of forcefully activating the ritual somehow, Yuad had been obsessed with obtaining Eugene as a sacrifice. It seems that wasn't just Yuad's stubbornness, Eugene thought. Vermouth wasn't the only enemy of those demon kings. For the spirit of darkness, Eugene must have been a great potential sacrifice they couldn't give up on. This term, the Pride, is frequently mentioned throughout this diary. Is this referring to cancer within the Lionheart clan? Atarax deduced. Right after this incident occurred, of the many collateral branches of the Lionheart clan that have spread across the continent, 4 families have suspiciously disappeared. In addition, a few members of other branches have also disappeared, Klein explained. They are most probably a Lionheart splinter group that led Dominic astray and tried to make use of Yuad. Are they still a threat? Atarax inquired. Not at all, Klein replied without any hesitation. If Dominic had successfully managed to steal the Demon Spear and the Annihilation Hammer, they could have become a dangerous organization. And if Yuad had completed the ceremony, their group would have become a true terror. However, they weren't able to accomplish anything. They might have claimed a fancy and grand name for themselves as the Pride, but they are nothing more than a bunch of losers who ran away, abandoning all they had to preserve their own lives. However, if they manage to emigrate to Helmuth, the Lionheart clan's prestige may fall to the ground, Atarax warned. Do you think our prestige really has any more room to fall? Klein scoffed with a chuckle as he shook his head. Should they manage to emigrate to Helmuth, we may instead be grateful for it. Should Helmuth really make public the news that descendants of the great heroes clan have willingly walked into Helmuth's embrace on their own 2 feet, then we will leave it up to the Black Lions to take care of them. They might emigrate to Nahama or even hide in the Samar rainforest. Atarax murmured a reminder as he closed the diary. We've finished our inspection of the magic circle, Lovelian said as he stood up. Excluding the help of a black wizard or a high-ranking demon folk from Helmuth, our interpretation of its purposes should be the best available. Please give us your expert opinion, Klein requested. The purpose of this ritual is a reconstitution of the soul and the creation of a body, Lovelian declared as his face twisted into a scowl. The basic gist of the spell is similar to summoning magic, though it has been twisted into an obscene mess. Did you say that it was intended to create a body? Adrix confirmed. If the sacrifices had been made successfully, this magic circle would have summoned a large number of demonic beasts from Helmuth. Then he would have probably constructed a new body by using a mixture of those demonic beasts, Lovelian theorized. What about the reconstruction of the soul? Adrix asked after processing the previous answer. Melkith answered this question, it's literally what it sounds like. The thing that died here was a spirit of darkness born from the remnants of the demon kings, not a demon king itself. But if the ritual had been completed, then it could have become a higher-ranking spirit king. Melkith stopped talking for a moment to burst into laughter. I have to say that this is quite a surprise. To think that a spirit of darkness was trying to raise its own status through independent and artificial means. Should I say as expected from the remnants of the demon kings? They attempted a method that an ordinary spirit would definitely never even think of, Melkith reluctantly admired. So they'd be a spirit king without a body, Eugene muttered. Although they might not be able to reach the heights of a demon king right away, they were close to becoming an existence that would likely reach the heights of a demon king in time, Lovelian said as he turned to look at Eugene. Saying that, fortunately, they didn't succeed. It's all thanks to the blessings placed on the holy sword and the hero, Adrix praised. With a pleased chuckle he applauded Eugene. Adrix's applause suddenly cut off as he began, however. Jerke. The metallic sound leaked out from behind Himoria's mask once more. It seems that not everyone who was here died that night, Adrix concluded. Boom. Adrix's foot stomped on the ground. As his body was surrounded by a soft brilliance, a mass of the dead and blackened soil rose as one. Faith. The floating soil flowed forth like a wave of sand. Slowly, very slowly, the soil advanced forward toward the huge hole that had been created during the fierce battle. As the soil neared the entrance to the hole, it suddenly began to whirl around. Shum. Lovelian let out a low grunt of surprise. He hadn't been able to detect any traces of magic at that spot. Even when holding Akasha, Eugene also hadn't been able to see anything. However, as a department of the Holy Empire's Inquisition, the Inquisitors of the Malficarum were expert hunters who had received training in eliminating black magic and hunting down demon folk that had been passed down over hundreds of years. Adrix was one of a handful of the most talented members of the Malficarum. He had examined all the remaining demonic power in this area and found traces of the black magic that had been cast here 5 days ago. Although it's impossible to reproduce the exact technique. Adrix tightened his control over the soil hanging in midair and continued speaking. This was some kind of spatial transportation. It wasn't blink but instead some kind of long-distance technique that allows one to teleport without going through a gate. Hector, Eugene growled as his face contorted into a scowl. It looks like he managed to get away. You didn't allow him to run away, did you? Adrix asked, turning to look at Eugene with a grin. Glaring back into those seemingly amiable eyes, Eugene shrugged and replied, What reason could I have for allowing him to escape? You might have a reason you don't want others to know about, Adrix insisted. Eugene growled, Me? Someone who's been recognized by the Holy Sword. I just want to explore all the possibilities. Because the Holy Sword does not necessarily prove one's innocence, Adrix stated calmly. I thought that Hector was dead, Eugene shrugged once more. For it to turn out that he ran away, it seems like he was much more talented than I expected. Why didn't you confirm it? Adrix asked with disapproval. Adopting an insolent tone, Eugene asked, What if I tell you that it's because I didn't want to? Sir Eugene, your carelessness allowed this rat to run away, Adrix accused. We don't know if this rat might manage to sneak away to hide in a shed, where he can devour some grain before continuing to spread disease. Hold on, I don't think I fucking get what you're trying to say, Eugene tried to respond calmly before giving in and losing his temper. Are you really trying to say that I fucking let him get away on purpose? The motherfucker who tried to kill me? I told you I didn't know that he was fucking alive. I was busy keeping my eyes on the demon spear trying to stab me and the annihilation hammer trying to crush my head in. All while the bastard who I called my older brother joined hands with a spirit of darkness to try and sacrifice me. So how the fuck was I supposed to check if that bastard who should have been out for the count had either escaped or was swept away by our attacks and had died? Please don't be upset, Adarix tried to calm him. I'm not upset. I'm just irritated. No matter how much I think about it, it's ridiculous and infuriating. Are you fucking making light of the Holy Sword? Do you think that you can hold the Holy Sword? Eugene challenged them. Jury. And is she a mute or what? Why has she just been making those grk noises instead of speaking? If you're going to question my words and fuck with me, then stop gurking away over there and fucking say something. If you're going to pretend like there's nothing wrong, then just stop with those grk noises already. In the face of Eugene's outburst, Adarix's mouth snapped shut, and Himoria also blinked in surprise as she stopped making those grk noises. That's enough, Eugene stated as he took a deep breath, then planted the holy sword he was holding into the ground. If you have any more complaints or just want to spout off some more bullshit, then before you say anything, you need to pull this holy sword out first. Eugene folded his arms and stepped back from the holy sword. He then gave this ultimatum: I'm not going to take this shit from a pious jerk who only pretends to be faithful if he can't even draw the holy sword. Momo's thoughts. Melkith had me at my own brand of insanity. You girl. And Eugene had me at stop gurking away. Chapter 154. The Inquisition 3. A much louder sound than all the previously heard sounds emerged from within Himoria's mask. Her eyes had transformed into a much deeper shade of red than they had been at first. Rather than just bloodshot, it felt as if something was burning within them. Unlike Himoria, who was exhibiting intense emotions, Adarix's expression was calm. He smiled as he looked between the holy sword, plunged into the ground, and Eugene standing there with his arms crossed. Pretends to be faithful, you say? Sir Eugene, you might be the only person who would dare to say such a thing to an inquisitor of the Malficarum, Adarix said with calm amazement. Eugene shot back. I'm also the only one to be recognized by the holy sword as its master. Adarix tried to defend himself. I'm only trying to consider all the possibilities. Weren't you the one saying earlier that there was no way that I, the master of the holy sword, would be corrupted by black magic? Eugene reminded him. Allowing Hector to escape is a different matter from being corrupted by black magic, Adarix argued. If we keep going back and forth like this, it will never end. Are you trying to somehow force me into making a confession? Eugene asked with a smirk as he glared at Adarix. It feels to me like you think that you've bitten onto the tail of a large catch, and now you're racing ahead of yourself to reel it in. There's no way that could be the case. Adarix denied the accusation as he backed down with a shrug. For now, I'll just choose to accept it. I will do my best to have faith that Hector Lionheart's escape truly had nothing to do with you, Sir Eugene. In fact, if you want to prove your innocence for certain, you want to use confession on me, right? Eugene interrupted. Were you already aware of it? All I know is that it's a cruel method of interrogation that tears the victim's mind into pieces. Haha. Adarix laughed. There's no need to worry about the danger of that. Because the experts of the Malficarum are better than anyone else in the Holy Empire when it comes to interrogation. It's not like we intend on digging too deep. We only want the truth of what happened 5 days ago, so there should be no after effects from the investigation. Have you already forgotten what I just said? Eugene asked as he gestured with his chin, pointing to the sword embedded in front of him. If you're displeased with me or feel like you want to start an argument, then I'm telling you to come over here and pull out the holy sword first. That's quite an interesting proposal, Adarix eventually muttered as his gaze turned towards Himoria. Himoria, who had been glaring at Eugene with her blood-red eyes, strode over to the holy sword until she was right within arm's reach. The corners of Eugene's lips twisted up in a smile as he met Himoria's intense glare. Came the sound from behind Himoria's mask. Such a sound seemed too loud and sharp to be made just by grinding her teeth. Eugene tilted his head to the side in curiosity as he stared at Himoria. You don't seem like a beast folk, but could your teeth really be as terrible as a beast's? Eugene observed. My disciple is currently serving a vow of silence, so she cannot use her voice, Adarix explained in Himoria's stead. So she had taken a vow of silence. Eugene let out a snort and backed down. Himoria's hand, which was covered by a black glove, reached out toward the holy sword. But the moment when her long fingers were about to touch the hilt of the holy sword, whoosh! The holy sword's flames engulfed Himoria's hand. However, Himoria didn't panic or even let out a scream. She calmly withdrew her hand and then shook off the flame that had wrapped around her glove. Himoria's skin was made visible through the cracks that the flame had burnt into the glove. Her coloring looked pale and bloodless. Himoria felt Eugene's gaze on her. She took off her glove and lifted her hand as if inviting him to take a closer look. Her skin was pale, but apart from that there was nothing special to it. The grinding sound was heard once more as Himoria began waving her hand between Eugene and herself. Is that sign language? Eugene eventually realized. She's asking if you thought she was a vampire, Lovelian translated. Without seeking to avoid Himoria's piercing glare, Eugene replied, she's just asking to be noticed with how loudly she's grinding her teeth, and the sound is quite sharp. Her eyes are red, her skin is white, and she's wearing a hat, cloak, and even gloves. Isn't that enough reason to be suspicious of her? To suspect an inquisitor of being a vampire, Atarax murmured. Unfortunately, the Maleficarum is a more conservative organization than you seem to think, Sir Eugene, so demon folk like vampires cannot be accepted as inquisitors. Eugene noticed something. Does that mean that they might be accepted for positions other than as an inquisitor? That's correct, because even a demon folk has the right to convert. If they truly desire to serve the God of Light as his priests, why not baptize them and allow them to serve as evangelists of the light? Atarax said with a smile as he patted Himoria on the shoulder. Even Himoria, whose faith is so strong, is unable to grasp the holy sword. As expected of the holy sword. How about you? Eugene challenged. If I pointlessly try to stretch my hand towards it, all I might end up with is a burnt hand. I'm afraid that I have no desire to be humiliated like that, Atarax said as he turned and walked over to the place where Hector had disappeared. Then, while looking at the soil still floating in the air, he continued speaking. In any case, we've confirmed that Hector Lionheart escaped from here without dying. Such long-range teleportation. Only an archwizard would be capable of such a thing. Lovelian chimed in with narrowed eyes. To perform a blink, you need to calculate the coordinates of an arrival point within your field of view and leap there. As long as you're able to perform those calculations accurately, blink isn't too difficult or complicated a spell. However, long-range teleportation is an entirely different matter. Atarax slightly corrected him. This was a warp that connected the gates on both sides of a teleport. It's slightly different from a teleport spell. For this type of teleportation, the one being teleported needed a guidepost. If the world tree, for example, was the guidepost, one would be able to teleport to the world tree from anywhere in the world using one of its leaves. Unless we're able to figure out what Hector used as a medium for the warp, we have no way of knowing where he teleported to, Atarax declared. However, just how many wizards in the world can manage such a teleportation? Melkith pointed out with a grin as she started counting on her fingers. First of all, there's Aratha's 5 Tower Masters. Then there's Tremple Vizardo, commander of the Court Wizards Division. Then, as far as I know, none other should have reached the 8th circle among all the wizards belonging to other nations. I just left the royal palace of Kiel this morning, Gilead revealed. Kiel still has to have raised an 8th circle archwizard. This reply had the corners of Melkitha's lips shooting right up to her cheekbones. Isn't that why Arath is known as the Kingdom of Magic no matter what? Including the Tower Masters, the kingdom has 6 archwizards after all. If war were to break out, wouldn't it be possible for Arath to unite the continent all on its own? Melkith declared proudly. Lovelian spoke up. The Tower Masters are not obligated to participate should Arath choose to start any wars of conquest. If Arath were to start such a war, then perhaps everyone in the Red Tower of Magic, including myself, would choose to leave Arath. That goes for me as well, but... Melkith continued speaking with a snicker. Setting aside Arath, the only place with wizards capable of a teleportation like this is Helmuth. There's the Staff of Incarceration, Edmund Codrith, and a few other high-ranking demon folk. Lovelian picked up the topic, the Queen of the Night Demons and the Black Dragon. Those are 2 most famous of the latter group. While bringing up the Black Dragon, Lovelian spared Eugene a glance. Lovelian was the one responsible for investigating Rhyzakia on behalf of Eugene. As such, he was aware of the possibility that Rhyzakia, currently reigning over the Dragon Demon Castle in Helmuth, might not be the real Rhyzakia. Lovelian continued. Amongst the high-ranking demon folk, There might be other archwizards capable of teleportation apart from those two. Demon folk live many times longer than humans, and they are much better at casting black magic than humans. Isn't there also an archwizard in Nahama? Atarax brought up with narrowed eyes. The dungeon master of the desert, Amelia Merwin. We are aware that the situation between Keel and Nahama has been unstable for several years now. Weakening Keel's power by promoting internal division within Keel's Lionheart clan. Sounds like something that Nahama, who swallowed Taraz while blaming it on the sandstorms, would do. On top of that, Amelia Merwin is also a black wizard who has signed a contract with a demon king. That might be the case, but the demon king of incarceration shouldn't be the one supporting Hector and giving him orders. Eugene continued with a serious expression, because an affair like this is too trivial for a demon king to even pay any attention to. In the first place, would the demon king of incarceration feel any need to resurrect the demon kings who died 300 years ago out of loyalty to them? Hesitantly, Atarax responded, "Well, don't you think you're being a bit too definite?" "Sir Atarax, I have also been a diligent student of history since I was young. The demon kings have never cooperated with each other. From 300 years ago until now, the demon kings have always been competing to see who can cause more nations to collapse and who can increase their territory and power the most," Eugene stated confidently. Of course, Eugene hadn't actually studied history. He had lived right in the middle of said history, so there wasn't any need for him to study it. Even as the 3 demon kings were slain, the remaining demon kings had never once cooperated with each other. Although they were all collectively called the demon kings, there was no sense of camaraderie among them. Would the demon king of incarceration really get involved personally, pulling this sort of scheme to revive the deceased demon kings and divide the Lionheart clan? What reason could a demon king have for doing so? As an inquisitor, particularly one from the Malfakaram, you should know this. A demon king is an existence that doesn't need to do something like this, Eugene said with a sneer. Would the demon king of incarceration have any reason to try and split apart the Lionheart clan? Especially when, if he really bothered to take any action, he could just directly tear the clan into pieces himself. Similarly, was there any need for him to try to secretly perform this ritual to resurrect the deceased demon kings? After all, he could just perform the ritual openly while wiping out all who dared to interfere. So I don't think that the demon king has anything to do with this, Eugene concluded. The ones who were currently under suspicion were the 3 black wizards who had signed a contract with the demon king of incarceration, Aratha's archwizards, and certain high-ranking demon folk. Having escaped from the consequences of this incident, Hector Lionheart should no longer be able to travel around the continent in peace, Atarax reasoned. However, if he has escaped to a place without any public order, that's a different story. Even the eyes of light, spread across the continent, cannot fully grasp a lawless place like the Samar rainforest. Eugene asked doubtfully, "So you're saying that Hector could have fled to Samar?" "I think there's quite a significant possibility that he did, yes. Sir Eugene, I've heard that you have developed a good relationship with the Zoran tribe, one of the great tribes of Samar. Wouldn't you be able to request some help for them?" Atarax proposed with a smile as he stared at Eugene. At this mention of the Zoran tribe, Eugene recalled Ivatar, the heir to the tribe who had escorted him on his way out of Samar. Since that forest is so large, it should be very difficult to find someone specific, Eugene pointed out reluctantly. "It's up to you, Sir Eugene, on how to make such a request," Atarax said with a shrug. "Depending on your desire, you can ask them to capture or kill the fugitive Hector Lionheart. And what will the Malfakaram be doing? Since Hector Lionheart was involved in this ritual, we will of course also be doing our best to pursue him. And to do so, we will be using the eyes of light spread across the continent. The God of Light did have a truly large number of followers. My deepest regrets." Atarax apologized as he took off the shako he was wearing and bowed his head toward them. "It seems that we weren't actually able to clarify anything. However, we truly are sorry for the tragedy that took place here. It's quite a disgrace," Klein admitted as he let out a deep sigh. "Since there's nothing more to investigate here and you've checked everything that you can, why don't we head back to the castle now? Since you also have to interview the children involved in this incident. Thank you for your understanding." Atarax abruptly stopped talking and turned his head. Then, while staring at Himoria, he let out a low chuckle and murmured, Indeed. What's the matter?" Eugene inquired with a disingenuous expression. The truth was that he had already guessed what might soon be unfolding. While the conversation was going on, Himoria had continued to stare at Eugene and the holy sword. While her gaze wasn't as filled with hostility as before, Eugene felt a familiar motivation and desire for victory coming from Himoria. Atarax said, "It appears that she wants to confirm for herself why you were acknowledged as the master of the holy sword, Sir Eugene. But it feels to me like you might also share that same desire, Sir Atarax?" Eugene prompted. I won't deny it. Because it's not just in the Holy Empire. Everyone on this continent has heard the fairy tales of the holy sword Altair and the hero chosen to wield it since they were young. Atarax admitted with a low chuckle as he approached Himoria. Of course there is also some dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction? Eugene repeated. Atarax explained, the Lionhearts have kept the holy sword in their possession for the past 300 years without ever returning it to the Holy Empire. Since the Great Vermouth, no one in the Lionheart clan has been able to become the Holy Sword's master. However, what if the Holy Sword had been returned to the Holy Empire? Couldn't it have been possible for one of our devout and exceptional youngsters to have become the master of the Holy Sword during that time? That might have been possible, but I don't think that devout and exceptional youngster would have been you, Eugene said with a smirk as he tilted his head. Also, the fact is that even Euraz's Pope has acknowledged my identity as the master of the Holy Sword. However, Sir Eugene, you aren't even a believer of the God of Light, nor are you a citizen of Euraz. So what do you propose to do about that? Atarax responded calmly, I'm not trying to say we should take the Holy Sword from you. It's not like that would even be possible, Eugene snorted. It's just, I would like to ask if you would be willing to accommodate my disciple's desire. Atarax requested as he placed a hand on Himoria's shoulder. Would you agree to a light spar? With me using the holy sword? If you need to. I don't feel like there's any need for that, Eugene denied with a laugh as he took off the cloak of darkness. Mare hurriedly stuck her head out from inside the cloak at this move and protested, Sir Eugene. Your body still isn't. It's fine, it's fine. It's only going to be a light spar, so. Eugene laughed off Mare's concern as he dropped the cloak to the floor. Melkith, who had been quietly watching from the side, shrieked at this action and ran over to Eugene. Don't drop it on the ground. Melkith cried out. You'll get dirt on it. Although there were still a few years left until Eugene had to return it, Melkith had no desire to see her precious cloak left lying on this dirty ground. Ignoring Melkith, Eugene asked Atarax, what about weapons? Atarax replied, Himoria doesn't use any weapon in particular. Aha, so her whole body is a weapon or some cliché thing like that. Fine then. It seems like you've trained her well, Eugene assessed. Please don't underestimate my disciple too much, Atarax warned him. Aren't you the one underestimating me? Eugene countered with a broad smile as he shook his wrists loose. It seems that you two haven't fully realized this, but the one who you're questioning the qualifications of is the greatest genius in the history of the Lionheart clan since the time of our founding ancestor. I am also the master of both the Holy Sword and Akasha and the one who defeated the remnants of the Demon Kings. Sir Eugene, I do admit that you are quite impressive, but, as your familiar said just now, isn't it true that your body hasn't completely recovered yet? Atarax reminded him. It's just a light spar without even using any weapons. Won't we just be crossing our fists a little, so what's the matter with that? Eugene asked rhetorically. If you get injured we will make sure to offer treatment, Atarax promised. Even though it's not to the same extent as the saint candidate Christina, I'm still quite efficient at healing magic. The sound was heard once more from behind Himoria's mask. She took off her hat and cloak, then raised her fists as she took a stance. On the other hand, Eugene just kept his arms relaxed as he faced Himoria. Aren't you going to take off your mask? Eugene asked her. Himoria kept silent. Is that your way of asking me not to hit you in the face? Eugene asked. Eugene had been feeling dislike towards her since earlier. If you get hit in the jaw while wearing a metal mask like that, will it be my fist or your jaw that will hurt more? Eugene mused. Himoria had glared at him pretty fiercely, leaking blatant hostility and dissatisfaction while also making that strange grinding sound from the inside of her mask. She's also the one who picked this fight. While glaring black at Himoria, Eugene unbuttoned the top button of his dress shirt. Chapter 155. The Inquisition 4. Their confrontation began with a brief silence. Eugene couldn't hear any more grinding noises coming from Himoria's mouth. Instead, she glared at Eugene with narrowed eyes, then unclenched her fist and showed her hand to him. Was she using sign language again? Soon Eugene smirked wryly. He had correctly guessed that Himoria had held her hand up to convey some sign language. However, this time, Lovelian's help wasn't needed to translate what she was trying to tell him. That was how explicit and easy to understand Himoria's current use of sign language was. Himoria had just lifted up her index finger and then crooked it at him a few times. Eugene nodded in understanding as he stepped forward. It might be because an inquisitor is still a priest in the end, but it seems she's quite merciful, Eugene muttered to himself. Thoughts such as desiring to check the skills of the new master of the Holy Sword, who had finally appeared after hundreds of years, were understandable. And as an inquisitor she must be confident in her battle skill. But could Himoria really be thinking that she could win this fight? There's no way that could be the case, Eugene thought dismissively. If Himoria really did have such a thought, then there must be something wrong with her head. From the looks of it, her pride and stubbornness seemed quite strong, but it appeared that she had probably talked herself into a fight because she didn't like the look of Eugene and couldn't accept that he was the master of the Holy Sword. Of course, Eugene had no problems with accepting such a fight, because he felt the exact same dislike that Himoria knew that both the Inquisitors did. From openly praising him as the master of the Holy Sword to trying to find fault where there wasn't any to be found. Careful of your face, Eugene said suddenly. Then he moved without caring whether or not Himoria had managed to process these words. He took a large stride forward, but it wasn't just a simple step. A burst of mana pushed Eugene's body forward. This allowed Eugene to cover that considerable distance with just one step. After that, he swung at his target just like he had warned. Swish. Himoria's short hair fluttered in the wind as she dodged, barely managing to avoid direct contact as Eugene's foot passed right in front of Himoria's nose. Tap tap. After just one kick, Eugene took a few steps back, a grin on his face. Himoria's finger, which was still outstretched, returned to its former position as she once more clenched her fists. Himoria sprang into action. She daringly charged forward with a short hook of her fist. Bam! The fist that was about to drive into his side was caught by Eugene's hand. Himoria's fist instantly unclenched and her fingers intertwined with Eugene's. Eugene's eyes lit up as he felt an immense strength push his fingers back. However, Eugene couldn't feel any movement of mana within the fingers that were intertwined with his. Simply and barbarically, Himoria was merely exerting her strength without using mana. To have such power with her physique. Could she have a special constitution that makes her similar to a monster? Eugene speculated. This wasn't a strength that could be obtained through training. As he watched his fingers bend to the limits of their range of motion, Eugene calmly thought to himself. If things went on like this, his bones would be broken. Though that was only if he stayed still like an idiot. Bomb. Eugene's foot swept across the ground and struck Himoria's ankle, causing her to flinch and sway backward. She's tough, Eugene observed. Once again Eugene felt curious. Although he hadn't intended to shatter her ankle, he had hoped to at least twist it with that strike. However, Himoria's foot hadn't even shaken. Instead, it felt like he had kicked a whole piece of iron without any joints. Eugene realized something. Her body's density is different from a normal human's. Was it drugs? Or perhaps it was a mixture of magic and surgical modifications. Either way, Himoria's body wasn't entirely human. While clenching and unclenching his fingers that had almost been broken, Eugene kept an eye on Himoria. However, Himoria was just looking at Eugene with eyes full of disbelief. When his hand had descended to meet her fist, it had certainly been strong, but it had also been fast enough that she couldn't react in time. The same went for that first step he had taken. Himoria had been able to read his movements, but they had been so fast that it had been difficult for her to respond to them. The same event had played out again just now. It had been Himoria's turn to try and read his movements and block his attack, but that peculiar acceleration. It couldn't just be because of Eugene's physical abilities. If that were the case, there was no way that Himoria could have overpowered him earlier. Atarax narrowed his eyes as he watched the spar. Himoria was actually being overwhelmed in close combat. All of Himoria's moves were blocked right before she could make them, and at the exact moment when Himoria was unable to react, she was struck with precise counterattacks. There's something mixed in, Atarax realized. The way that Eugene's mana burst forth was simple yet peculiar. Something was mixed into his fighting style, but what? Could it be something from the Lionheart clan's White Flame formula? No, this was different. Rather than on the technique side of things, something seemed to be mixed in with his mana. Bomb. Himoria's feet left the ground once more. There weren't any cries of pain this time either. She had already been hammered in the jaw several times by now, but Himoria was always able to react like she hadn't felt any pain. The same went for this time as well. Glancing at his opponent's hands that were attempting to get close and grab hold of his body, Eugene used his other hand to grab one of Himoria's wrists. He immediately twisted Himoria's arm around behind her back. Although he had definitely dislocated her elbow, Himoria's arm didn't seem to lose any strength. While twisting her dislocated arm, she tried to swing Eugene's whole body around. As such, Eugene let go of her arm without any hesitation. Eugene then slammed his fist into the side that had been left completely open by Himoria's dislocated arm. He had already pounded that spot several times, but he couldn't feel any of the cracking sensations that should have come because Himoria's ribs were so dense that they didn't seem human. I'm sure of it now, Eugene thought as his brows furrowed. Apart from Eugene, most people wouldn't have been able to notice something else was going on. Indeed, it was because of one of his specialties from his previous life that Eugene had been able to discern what was happening: the ability to perfectly recover the mana drawn from his core without wasting any of it. Thanks to this ability, Eugene could feel that his mana was seeping into her with every blow against his own will. This wasn't just some coincidence. It had to be part of Himoria's plan. Since he wasn't using sword force or any type of spell, the mana flowing through Eugene's body seeped into Himoria whenever he came into contact with her body. Could it be a drain-type spell? Eugene wondered. But it seems too subtle for something like that. The mana being stolen wasn't strengthening Himoria. Although there had to be some plan where it could be used after it had been stolen, Himoria didn't seem intent on using his stolen mana right now. How cheeky, Eugene thought to himself. They had asked him for a light spar. As such, Eugene had assumed both of them would be willing to hold back a little. If Eugene had really wanted to hurt Himoria as much as he could have finished her off immediately with just one blow. So Eugene didn't really appreciate the way Himoria seemed to be planning on taking advantage of him, stealing away bits and pieces of his mana while refusing to let out any cries of pain. Eugene didn't know why she was called Guillotine Himoria, but rather than wanting to find out why her nickname was the Guillotine, he wanted to hear moans and screams coming from behind that mask instead of that annoying grinding sound. Crackle. Lightning and sparks of flame erupted from Eugene, scattering around him. Adrix's eyes trembled at the explosive burst of speed that Eugene showed next. Adrix wasn't alone in his surprise. Gilead and Klein were also surprised by Eugene's movements. Only Genos looked at Eugene with an unsurprised expression, even as the man felt his heart pounding in admiration. As expected of Sir Hamel, Genos thought proudly. The only ones here who knew Eugene's true identity were Genos and Mare. He definitely must not reveal that Eugene was actually Hamel, so Genos quickly fixed his expression. As for Himoria, she couldn't feel the same sense of surprise as her spectators. The distance between them was too close, so she experienced his speed before she could even sense it. Then, incomparably faster than any attack that had come before it, a heavy blow impaled her side. Himoria's body shook violently as she almost fell. Unable to properly adjust her body, she still swung her arms in an attempt to counterattack. After calmly retrieving his hand from her side, Eugene slammed his other fist into the center of Himoria's unguarded chest. Kahawk. Although she managed to hold back from screaming, Himoria couldn't do anything about getting the breath knocked out of her. She tried to retreat as she staggered backward, but Eugene grabbed Himoria's collar and pulled her closer. Crunch. A rising knee strike into her ribcage caused Himoria's whole body to tremble. Eugene didn't stop there, unleashing consecutive attacks. With each attack, Eugene checked where the mana that was being sucked from him was gathering. It wasn't to the core near her heart. Instead, the mana seeping into Himoria's body was gathering into the dantian below the navel. The dantian? Eugene thought in puzzlement. He had heard of some mana training scriptures that gathered mana to that area, but Eugene examined Himoria's body. Himoria already had a core near her heart, and what was being collected in her dantian was solely the mana she was secretly stealing from Eugene. You should have asked for permission first, Eugene muttered as he grabbed Himoria by the hair. Bomb. Aiming precisely at her dantian, Eugene slammed his fist straight into it. So far, Himoria had never once released a groan of pain, but this time was different. Eugene heard a gasp coming from behind her metal mask. Her other reactions were also intense. Himoria's body twisted violently, its movements going far beyond a normal joint's range of motion. As Himoria fell to the ground, her fist rose upwards, aiming at Eugene's face. Her fist had enough power behind it that, if it managed to land properly, his head would explode like a balloon popped by a needle. She's furious, Eugene noted. Her strength was even stronger than before. Her speed had also risen. But all that said, the gap between Eugene and Himoria still hadn't been closed. Under these conditions, Eugene couldn't imagine losing in a close-range battle. Himoria's spine shook with rage, but her rage wasn't enough to successfully land a hit on Eugene. All of Himoria's moves were completely within the palm of Eugene's hand. 1. Eugene tenaciously aimed all of his attacks at one location, the place where his stolen mana was gathered. Each time he landed an attack there, a groan leaked out from behind Himoria's mask. Kahawk. After an unknown number of blows, when Eugene's fist landed on her dantian again, Himoria couldn't endure it any longer. All the mana she had gathered in her dantian scattered as she tore off her mask in a coughing fit. Himoria tried to stagger backward, but Eugene refused to just let her go like this and grabbed her by the hair once more. Then he slammed his fist into her dantian one more time. Himoria's body was lifted off the ground by the precisely landed blow. Her body folded over like a shrimp as she let out a moan of agony. Seeing Himoria's legs trembling shakily, Eugene clenched his fist again and drove in another blow. In the end, Himoria wasn't able to endure any longer and collapsed on the spot. Eugene didn't continue striking her, clearly raising his hands and backing away. While covering her stomach with both hands, Himoria was racked with hacking coughs. The torn-off mask fell to the ground. Eugene hummed consideringly as he openly stared at Himoria's revealed face as he lowered his raised fists. He had been wondering how she was making such a grinding noise. It turned out that Himoria's teeth were so sharp that they could hardly be recognized as human. After spitting out a mouthful of blood with a cough, Himoria belatedly realized that she had removed her mask. At that moment, Himoria's eyes blazed with even more fury than before. No longer gasping in pain, she immediately rushed at Eugene. With her jaws wide open, she tried to bite into Eugene's flesh with her sharp teeth like a wild beast. Of course, Eugene wouldn't just offer up his flesh like Himoria wanted. He immediately took a step back as he swung his palm around. Bam! A merciless swing of his foot landed in Himoria's stomach. Kahawk! Blood sprayed out from between Himoria's lips as her body was sent flying from the impact of his kick. Eugene slowly lowered the foot that he had just swung to the ground as he laughed and said, "Sorry, you should have said that a bit quicker." Hack. Kahawk. Karg. Having landed back on the ground, Himoria let out pained moans as she wrapped her arms around her stomach. Blood and saliva dripped down from her wide-stretched lips. Atterix reluctantly accepted Eugene's half-hearted apology. "No, it's because my disciple was so stubborn." Even after realizing that she wouldn't be able to win, she still desperately tried to win somehow. "But it seems like she's not convinced of her defeat," Eugene said as he glanced down at Himoria. Having barely managed to catch her breath, Himoria rubbed away the blood around her mouth and then picked up the metal mask that had fallen to the ground. Eugene goaded, "Sir Atterix, if you let her off her leash, I don't mind continuing." "No, I'm afraid that we would be in a lot of trouble if we did so," Atterix rejected. "Why would that be?" "Sir Eugene has enough spare ability to afford to do so, but I'm afraid Himoria can't keep this up. If we continue, Himoria will surely cross the bounds of a light spar." "Are you worried about me?" "How could that be?" "I'm worried about my disciple." Having said this, Atterix approached Himoria and placed her cloak back around her shoulders. "As expected of you, Sir Eugene," Atterix acknowledged with a nod. "Although it was just a light spar, I couldn't spot any flaws in your physical skills. It was only natural for my disciple to be overwhelmed like this, and even if it were me facing you, I would definitely have suffered helplessly." Eugene waved off the praise. "You're being too humble." "One of my rare strengths is my modesty," Atterix jokingly said with a laugh. "Wasn't that blood magic just now?" Lovelian spoke up without any trace of amusement. While glaring at the metal mask covering Himoria's lips, he continued speaking, "That's one of the ancient magics that were lost long ago. Even Aroth doesn't have the complete record of that type of magic, so how? To think that you were able to recognize such an old style of magic, I wouldn't have expected anything less from the Red Tower Master," Adarix said as he turned to Lovelian with a calm expression. "The Malfakarum is an organization that has been battling enemies of the faith ever since the Church of Light was founded. We are both priests and hunters, paladins and butchers. Is it really that strange that we use magic other than divine magic? Of course that is certainly possible, but it can't be helped that it comes as such a surprise. Blood magic is an ancient magic that even Aroth has failed to restore. And the reason no complete record remains to this day is that the Holy Empire declared blood magic to be a type of heresy long ago and had persecuted its practitioners. This purge of magic occurred in the Holy Empire a long time ago. At that time, the Holy Empire declared that all the various types of magic apart from divine magic were a form of heresy. So treating it like black magic, they attempted to erase all other types of magic. This indiscriminate and self-righteous persecution wasn't only limited to wizards but also targeted spirit summoners. So countless spirit summoners and wizards were slain by the inquisitors of the Holy Empire. That's a story from long ago, Adarix pointed out without agitation. Also, the Holy Empire has already made amends for those crimes. In the temples of light we have raised all over the continent, there are facilities that care for children without parents, provide aid to those in need, supply free welfare and much more. For such a long period following those witch hunts, the Holy Empire has. Adarix's boasts weren't anything worth listening to. Although it might be true that they had done more good than harm to Eugene, that still made them no different from the Demon King of Incarceration. Even now, the Demon King of Incarceration was also giving reparation to other countries as compensation for the war 300 years ago. Blood magic isn't heretical, Adarix continued his explanation with a cheerful smile. That was all a misunderstanding based on its use of blood as a medium. The Holy Empire analyzed blood magic a long time ago and came to the conclusion that it isn't inherently evil like black magic is. So now you're able to monopolize its use? Lovelian questioned indignantly. Calling it a monopoly is rather hurtful. After all, doesn't Aroth claim sole possession of many amazing examples of magic? Adarix argued. Strictly speaking, it's not possessing, it's protecting. Since a long time ago, some bastards did something crazy like trying to purge all magic, Melkith muttered with a derisive snort. Adarix shot a glance at Melkith before continuing to speak. That was a regrettable incident. Everyone has things they regret from their immature childhood. If you are interested in learning blood magic, please feel free to visit the headquarters of the Malfakarum. We don't put too many restrictions on what we teach or who we teach it to. As long as we consent to be baptized by the light, that is, Melkith finished for him. It's not like you have to face a difficult choice on which god to serve now, do you? Adarix asked with a wide smile. Grick. Once again the sound of grinding teeth leaked from behind Himoria's mask. You were far too reckless, Adarix chided with a deep sigh as he took off his shako. I never said you could expose your teeth, now did I? Himoria lowered her head as she stood there with her hands clasped behind her back. Adarix looked at his distraught disciple, then he slowly shook his head. Well, judging by his insistence in aiming for your dantian, it seems that he saw through the ruse immediately, but no matter how angry you were, you still shouldn't have shown your teeth without my permission. But that restriction doesn't apply if you truly need to defend yourself, Adarix reminded her. In reply, Himoria raised her hands. I'm sorry. Himoria conveyed her apology through sign language. Adarix clicked his tongue and continued, since you've had to endure a lot and you've already been beaten severely, I won't punish you for the transgression. But still, is there really not even a little of his mana left? That's right, Himoria signed. No matter how focused he was on attacking your dantian. Isn't it strange that not even a little bit of it was left? Eugene Lionheart's mana is strange. He was also far too quick in noticing it. All of the mana I stole from him has disappeared. Adarix's expression contorted as he read Himoria's sign language. Something was mixed into Eugene's mana. He was able to tell that much just from watching the spar. The flames of the white flame formula and that peculiar lightning. If Himoria had only been able to sneak away some mana, I could have analyzed it, Atterix sighed in unavoidable regret. Eugene was the hero recognized by the Holy Sword. Although they weren't too sure about his personality, his talent and skills were the real deal. Even though both participants in the spar had placed restrictions on themselves, Himoria had still been completely overwhelmed. What if we get a hold of his blood? Himoria proposed. You really want to infiltrate the Lionheart clan's territory? Atterix shook his head with a laugh and said, we might have used an aggressive method to try and test him, but the hero of the Holy Sword is not our enemy. Master, do you really think that he is worthy of being called the hero? Himoria asked skeptically. The fact that he has drawn the Holy Sword is irrefutable. Also, hasn't he done something that only a hero could do? Even if they were just the dregs, he destroyed the remnants of the Demon Kings. Atterix's laughter subsided as he muttered, however, for it to be another Lionheart. God really can be quite cruel. To set aside his countless followers and pick a Lionheart once more, and for the ownership of the Holy Sword to be given to a Lionheart in the same generation that a Lionheart fell to the seductions of the Demon King's remnants. The Holy Sword isn't the only special existence. Himoria continued to elaborate in sign language. The Holy Empire has the Saint of Brilliant Light. She might still only be a candidate, but Assistant Bishop Christina has the exact same appearance as the faithful Anise. How you're right. We still have the Saint candidate. Atterix agreed with a smile as he looked at the faith sparkling within Himoria's eyes. Grinding her teeth, Himoria continued to admit in sign language, I still wish that I could have become the master of the Holy Sword. It can't be helped, Atterix comforted her. Whoosh. Flames erupted from a match that Atterix was holding in his fingers. He lit the end of the cigarette in his mouth, then shook the match to extinguish it. Atterix muttered around his cigarette, it seems that faith alone is not enough to make you the master of the Holy Sword.